Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the breakdown streaming live on the Black Star Network. Multiple journalists were arrested after covering a protest sparking First Amendment questions. Well, thank you for joining us. Two Black journalists and two Black activists from Minneapolis were arrested in connection with a protest at a church on January 18th. Based on social media posts from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, those arrested were Traherne Cruz, a former candidate for mayor of St. Paul and a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter in Minnesota, and Jamil Lundy. Journalists Don Lemon and Georgia Fort were taken into custody on Thursday night and Friday morning, respectively. Officials justified the arrest by citing the FACE Act, a federal statute that prohibits the use of force or intimidation against anyone seeking access to reproductive services. But the act also contains provisions that apply to houses of worship. Georgia Fort recorded this video when federal agents showed up at her home and her kids were present.
You guys, I wanted to alert the public that agents are at my door right now. They're saying that they were able to go before a grand jury sometime, I guess, in the last 24 hours, and that they have a warrant for my arrest. I talked to my attorney, and I'm being advised to go with them, I guess, down to Whipple. And my children are here. They're impacted by this. This is all stemming from the fact that I filmed a protest as a member of the media. We are supposed to have our constitutional right of the freedom to film, to be a member of the press. I don't feel like I have my First Amendment right as a member of the press. Because now federal agents are at my door arresting me for filming the church protest a few weeks ago. Again, I don't have a long time here, you guys, but I wanted you to know, for me, agents are at my door right now. My attorney has spoken with them. I did send a relative outside to talk to them. They're showing some type of documentation, apparently, that they got an indictment from a grand jury. I knew that I was on a defendant's list. I did not publish it because it was under seal. And so we've done everything that we can to try and abide by, the advice of our attorneys. But right now, you guys, I wanted you to know I'm going to have to hop off here and surrender to agents as a member of the press. I filmed the church protest a few weeks ago, and now I'm being arrested for that. It's hard to understand how we have a constitution, constitutional rights, when you can just be arrested for being a member of the press. We've seen all these violations. All right, you guys, I got to go. They're knocking.
Joining me now to discuss the assault on the First Amendment are Roland Martin, the founder of Black Star Network and the vice president of digital at the National Association of Black Journalists, and Tanisha Tidwell, who served as Don Lemon's executive producer at CNN. We also have Thelma Lawyer Bay Anderson, the author of Shut Up and Prosecute. I want to thank you all for joining us today on The Breakdown. Roland, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts after seeing what has unfolded?
All right, so let's set this up. So what you have is you clearly have a lot of reaction here. You heard that statement there from Georgia. This is what Don Lemon's attorney released. Don Lemon was taken into custody by federal agents last night in Los Angeles, where he was covering the Grammy Awards. Don has been a journalist for 30 years, and his constitutionally protected work in Minneapolis was no different than what he has always done. The First Amendment exists to protect journalists whose role it is to shine light on the truth and hold those in power accountable. There's no more important time for people like Don to be doing this work. Instead of investigating the federal agents who killed two peaceful Minnesota protesters, the Trump Justice Department is devoting its time, attention, and resources to this arrest, and that is the real indictment of wrongdoing in this case. this unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from the many crises facing this administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court. Now, of course, this statement comes today just as the Trump administration, while this is going on, also unveiled the release of several million documents related to the Epstein files. Obviously, journalists all across the country are commenting on this. Don's former company, CNN, dropped this statement. The FBI's arrest of our former CNN colleague, Don Lemon, raises profoundly concerning questions about press freedom and the First Amendment. The Department of Justice already failed twice to get an arrest warrant for Don and several other journalists in Minnesota, where a chief judge of the Minnesota Federal District Court found there was, quote, no evidence, unquote, that there was any criminal behavior involved in their work. The First Amendment in the United States protects journalists who bear witness to news and events as they unfold, ensuring they can report freely in the public interest. The DOJ's attempts to violate those rights is unacceptable. We will be following this case closely. Now, I am on the board of NABJ. We are actually releasing our statement shortly. Our president, Aaron Haynes, was earlier on Don Lemon's feed. The reaction also has been swift from politicians as well. At his daily news conference, of course, Democratic House Leader Hakeem Jeffries was specifically asked a question with regards to this very
Trump
issue. This is what he actually
has systematically targeted the free and fair press because they want to intimidate America and oppose anyone who is not willing, going to be intimidated at all. The free and fair press is central to the foundation of American democracy. Thomas Jefferson famously made that clear, that he would prefer a country that had newspapers over government as opposed to governments over newspapers. This is central to who we are as a country. And so Don Lemon, we know, is an accomplished journalist who was doing his job as part of the free and fair press. There's no legitimacy, no basis to Don Lemon's arrest, no basis to the arrest of the other journalists. And the American people are not going to stand for it. And House Democrats are going to stand up for them. And the rights of the free and fair press as central to American democracy and our values in terms of who we are.
None of us should be surprised by this. First and foremost, Donald Trump and his Department of Justice, they have had a bullseye on the back of the media from day one. Not only the first time he was there, but also when he came in. We saw, of course, the lawsuits that he filed against CBS, against ABC, attacking various media companies. And too many of these media companies actually folded. We've seen the reaction from the Washington Post and so many others to this threat because he is a dictator. Project 2025 outlined this as well. We talk about hashtag. We tried to tell you this is what these folks said they were going to do. They despise the press. Donald Trump, they've been wanting to, they attack the media at every turn. When he first ran for president, everything about fake news was all about attacking the press because he wants to, of course, he wants folks to believe that anything the press reports simply is not true. And so this is what this is. Here's what's also crazy here. MS Now, formerly MSNBC, is reporting that career prosecutors in Minneapolis, that they went to career prosecutors in Minneapolis and Los Angeles. And they said, ain't no evidence here. They tried before, not only with an appeals court and a judge in Minneapolis. They were like, what are you doing? But they were going to get a grand jury to do this. Remember, the exact same thing happened to Letitia James. The exact same thing happened to former FBI Director James Comey. And so they were going to find a judge who was going to agree with him. And so it is an absolute attack on the First Amendment. But remember, journalists have a bull's eye on their back because these people are evil. They want to not just limit the media. They want to destroy the media. This is exactly what Donald Trump's agenda is, and it's not going to be the last time we see this happen.
Thank you, Roland. I want to bring in Tanisha Tidwell. This is Don Lemon's former producer at CNN. When you heard the news about what had happened to him, what began going through your mind?
Hey, Brittany, just shock. Woke up and seeing this news first thing in the morning, disgusted, shock, and really unbelief. We live in a country where the administration is proud. You saw what they put out. They put out, this is what happens. This is what happens with lemons. So you saw their statement too. When life hands you lemons is what they put. This is disgusting. There is no leadership. There is no character. There's no morale here. This is an attack on the American people. And people may say, well, I'm not a journalist. It's not an attack on me. Yes, it is. This is for everyone to pay attention, not just journalists. If they come for a journalist, they're coming for you next. Okay. If they are ripping people out of their homes, out of their cars, killing them in broad daylight in the streets of Minneapolis, they're coming for you. Okay. So this is for everyone to pay attention. Our job as journalists is protected in the United States Constitution. Okay. There is no other job listed in the Constitution. It says the press, right? There are 5 core freedoms that we have: religion, speech, the press, peaceful assembly, right to petition. The press is so important that they thought to write this into the Constitution. We have a right to be able to report and to go along and to embed. And if Don Lemon chose to embed with the group that was going into a church, he was an embedded reporter. He can do that. He has that right.
In fact, Tanisha, journalists embed with the military in Iraq
all the time. As an executive producer at CNN for almost 13, 14 years, we had journalists embedding with military units all of the time, going into Syria and Iraq and Iran, and they were embedded, and they could tell the stories and be objectionable and tell both sides, tell what they were seeing. When you look at the Don Lemon tape, that is what he was doing. He was embedding in this unit that was going into this church as protesters, which are all covered by the Constitution. So there are no grounds, as you said, Roland. There are no grounds for an arrest. There are no. What you have is these puppets, right, that are on the strings by the Trump administration. These judges, right, that are signing these crazy warrants to be able to do these things. These are Trump's friends. They're the puppets, right, being told what to do. So that is why you have this. This is exactly what just happened in my backyard here in Atlanta with the elections headquarters in Fulton County. There was no reason for that FBI raid, but a judge who's in bed with the Trump administration signs off on it. So here you go. These are bullying tactics. These are tactics for intimidation. And look at what's happening. The people of color. Fulton County is a county of color, okay, in Atlanta, right? That is where that's happening. Don Lemon, those who were arrested with him, the 4 arrested, Black people, okay? Could you imagine Anderson Cooper being arrested for this? I mean, God bless Anderson Cooper, but really, let's just be honest here. And then you have a sick White House that puts out "When life gives you lemons."
In fact, this is the actual tweet right here. You see it right here. When life gives you lemons, and this is the graphic. Don Lemon arrested for involvement in the St. Paul church riots. This is people need to understand. This is the official White House feed. These are taxpayers paying for this.
No couth, no class, no elegance, no intelligence, nothing. It is like 3rd grade bullying. Those of us who are parents who teach our children, you don't use cruel words, you're kind, you don't name call, all of the things that we teach our children not to do. We have elected a man in office and he's doing it. And as a leader, he's emboldening people to do it as well. So when people are cursing people out and calling people's names and belittling them, people of all races and ages, that is coming from the top. And we, the people, have elected this. We're wondering, how did Hitler become Hitler? This is it. We are watching it with our own eyes, how Hitler became Hitler. We're watching a regime come into power. We're watching people stand by and do nothing. We're watching the press be just ran over and talked about. There are people at the White House right now, and we cannot call names, right? But they are afraid doing their jobs. They're told what to write. They're told what to say. They are afraid. You saw what he did to April Ryan when April Ryan was there. These people are afraid. We watched him on camera call a journalist pig. Pig.
I mean, listen, he attacked.
President Obama did that?
He attacked last time and this time. He's attacked April Ryan, Michelle Sindor, Rachel Scott, Ebony McMorris. I mean, he that's what he does. Cecilia Vega. I mean, this is what he does. The folks at R10DA, the Radio Television News Directors Association, they also put out their statement. This is Tara Puckey, R10DA president and CEO. The First Amendment is unambiguous. Journalism and journalists must be protected as they seek and report the truth. The Department of Justice cannot arrest a journalist simply because they don't like the journalism. The Radio Television Digital News Association demands all charges against Don Lemon and Georgia Fort be dropped immediately. Further, RTNDA calls on this administration to reevaluate its dangerous rhetoric and actions toward those who seek to inform their communities. Look, like I said, this is who these people are. And Donald Trump is going to celebrate this. His MAGA lovers are going to celebrate this. They're going to say, show you right. And this is just going to show you again the clear partisan divide, because how they view the media. Donald Trump and MAGA views non-right-wing media as the enemy. But this is what conservatives have been doing for more than 50 years. People have to understand. You go back to Dan Rather when he was at CBS, when he was the White House correspondent, when he was vigorously questioning Richard Nixon. What did they say? That this whole Fire Dan Rather campaign. And so the conservatives have always said, oh, the media is so liberal, it's so liberal, it's so liberal. That's what the Brendan Carr, the FCC commission chair, is all about. They believe the media is completely liberal, so therefore it must be transformed. And so this setup, what you see here, this thing has been positioned since going back to the 1970s and 1960s, because the right has been angry with the media covering civil rights movement, covering issues of impacting African Americans and others. And so people need to understand the context of this. They believe the media, colleges, all of these elite institutions are liberal havens, so therefore they must be destroyed. That is what their goal is.
I want to bring in Thelma Anderson to the conversation. She's an attorney, and I want you to tell me, does the First Amendment actually protect journalists on the ground?
The First Amendment, not only protects journalists on the ground, but it protects the average human being that wants to speak up. So what we're seeing now is a dictatorship that feels that they're above the law because they're in power. So what is happening right now is indicative of what we experienced during the civil rights movement. But because we're on the other side of the mic now, they got to put us in a mix somehow. So that is the reason why they're coming after people of color first with this attack on the press.
And Thelma,
go ahead.
I just want to know what kind of precedents this sets if authorities just start arresting journalists who are present at disruptive demonstrations.
It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And we know it's dangerous when a judge said no. We know it's dangerous when several prosecutors said no. So it's not they have already cemented what this administration stands on. And we got to adapt and adjust accordingly, because we know that we're following the law, but they know that they're not following the law. And that's what is the issue.
Well, Thelma, here's the thing here. First of all, this is actually, Ben Crump posted this here. This is a video from the Nest camera that was outside of the home of Georgia Fort. As you see, she's meeting with law enforcement. First of all, why the hell is the DEA there?
They had no business being there.
They're the Drug Enforcement Administration. Why is the DEA arresting a journalist? I mean, so understand that. But Thelma, I got to ask you this here. You're a lawyer. This is what really jumps out. You have career prosecutors, individuals who have committed their life to the law in the Department of Justice. What does it say to you when you have career prosecutors in Minneapolis, in LA, who have looked in previous cases, in the case in Virginia, Donald Trump fired the U.S. attorney in Virginia because he would not prosecute Letitia James. You've had after the killing of Renee Good, Alex Preddy, you had 6 or 8 prosecutors who resigned from the U.S. attorney's office. This is the crazy thing. We was happening not just with journalists, it's how they are forcing career prosecutors who believe in the law, who say there's no evidence to arrest these journalists. They're just like, oh, we don't give a damn, and they are firing these people. They are literally walking them out of the building because they refuse to do the bidding of Donald Trump. What does it say about the law?
What it says about the law, when you have individuals who are formerly in a seat that I held as a former prosecutor and a former magistrate judge that handled the very same matters that warrant why these career prosecutors and these career judges said no. It is literally saying that they do not give a fuck about the law. They are above the law. That's how they have handled this administration from day one. So when you see these prosecutors coming out in the masses and said, no, not only do I have the Constitution to uphold, I have the oath of office and I have the oath of the license that I took and I swore on to say that I am going to do justice and seek justice, not seek to be above the law and not follow the law.
Family, this is incredible. Ken Delanian of MSN Now. Actually, Ken is a great reporter. I actually worked with him when we were both at the Fort Worth Star Telegram. He was a county government reporter. I was a city hall reporter. This is what he just reported. 2 people familiar with the matter tell MS Now News that the special agent in charge of the FBI's Atlanta field office, Paul Brown, was forced out of that job earlier this month over his qualms about and refusal to carry out the searches and seizures of the Fulton County ballots. And this is the thing that I'm saying. When you take this story, they forced out the Black Admiral when it came to the killing of shooting down of Venezuelan boats. They're forcing out prosecutors. What these people are doing, they are forcing out very highly, eminently qualified people who refuse to break the law, who refuse to do things that are illegal. These people do not care about the law. And that to me is what is shameful and despicable. And they're doing it on the taxpayer dime.
Here's the thing that I want to specifically speak on. And this is the reason why I wrote Shut Up and Prosecute, because I have witnessed when you have an unqualified individual that is running a government entity, one of the most powerful entities in your state, you cannot have a yes man. A yes man to injustice is very dangerous. And this is what we are seeing. What we have to see now from these prosecutors, or what side of law are you going to stand on? Are you going to stand on the right side of law, or are you going to stand out on the wrong side of law? Because we need to see you. We need to know, because we have not only on the local side, we need to see on the other side, because this has been happening for a while. And I said this year is the year that skeletons were going to come out in every avenue, every profession. And we're seeing the skeletons of the legal system being put on display that has been this way for Black and brown people for the entire existence as to why we have the criminal justice system.
Hey, Brittany, AG Pam Bondi just dropped this video here. It's a 16-second video that she dropped on Twitter.
Make no mistake, under President Trump's leadership and this administration, you have the right to worship freely and safely. And if I haven't been clear already, if you violate that sacred right, we are coming after you.
Let me just get your initial.
But I can tell you right now, don't be shocked. These people get embarrassed like they did in the James Comey, Letitia James case. I think that's what's coming. And so that's going to happen, Brittany.
You know, Roland, what does this moment say about the current relationship between law enforcement, protest movements, and the press here in America?
Well, actually, let's bring in Wesley Lowry, editor of BlackStarNetwork.com. He knows about this here. Of course, he was with the Washington Post and the Boston Globe. And here's the deal. He was there in Ferguson, and he can speak to how law enforcement, how they treated the press. Wesley, go ahead. Wesley, you on mute?
All right. Sorry about that, folks. I'm thinking about a few different dynamics here. Obviously, like Roland, like Brittany, like almost everyone, Black journalism is a small world, so I know Don, and previously served on the board of the National Association of Black Journalists and also the Freedom of Press Foundation. And as Roland, I think, alluded to, back in 2014, covering the Black Lives Matter demonstrations in Ferguson, I myself was arrested, was one of the first journalists arrested among dozens of journalists who were eventually arrested. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about, speaking about, interacting on these issues. I think a few things immediately come to mind for me. The first here is, and it has to be said clearly, you all have said it, right? This is egregious, right? This is the deliberate disregard of the spirit and letter of the law, and it is the targeting of critical journalism, accountability journalism, people who would be seen as oppositional, and people who the Trump administration do not see as their constituents, and therefore who they don't see as people who they have to respect or whose rights they have to respect. There's no coincidence that the journalists here arrested, Don and Georgia Ford, are both Black journalists, right. Because there's not the perception that the Trump administration will receive blowback from people who the Trump administration actually cares about for doing these types of actions. But there's something else I want to note just very specifically here, because I think it's important for us. I've been thinking about this across Minneapolis, not just today with what's happened with Don, but thinking about it in terms of the federal action of the ICE agents and the Border Patrol agents compared to what we see often with local police during protest movements and other moments. Is I think it's important to distinguish and to articulate the ways that what Donald Trump is doing are similar and carrying on things that have been done previously, and then to underscore the ways that it goes deeper and further, right? Because I think it's a contradictory two-edged sword where we very often want to claim that everything Donald Trump has done is without precedent and it's terrible and this and that. And I think often it's less comfortable for us to sit with the reality that a lot of what Donald Trump has done does have precedent. That he often does it without pretense. He doesn't try to hide his hand. He's more aggressive. But very often we do see, whether it be arrest of journalists covering protests, whether it's violence against migrants and others. But one of the key distinctions I think I want to make here is we very often, we talk about the role of journalists. The reality is protest and disruptive protest can be by its nature disruptive. At times, it can be illegal, right? We think back to the civil rights movement and other cases. When people participate in protest, often they do so knowing they are taking on a legal risk. One of the keys here is the role of a journalist in that context is different. Now, there are times in the fog of war, in the heat of a moment, when a riot is actually happening, when the streets are actually on fire, because the Trump administration is calling this the Minnesota church riots, there was no riot, right? That language, that accelerant language is purposeful, right? They're trying to build a pretext for what they're trying to do here. But there are times in the midst of a protest where the police arrest a bunch of people and journalists get caught up in that, right? Again, I say this as someone who's been arrested while covering a protest. And in those moments, that is an outrageous an unacceptable violation of the First Amendment. But we also do understand sometimes that in the heat of the moment, stuff happens and it gets sorted out. The reason I want to note that is because that's not what happened here. It's not that this demonstration happened and the police arrived and arrested everyone. It's that with full knowledge of who Don Lemon is, why he was there, what Georgia Fort was doing, the evidence that they were not participants, but rather that they were that clearly they're in a documentary First Amendment protected behavior, the Trump administration chose to then send federal prosecutors after Don Lemon afterwards, right? There's no cover of this was in the heat of the moment. We didn't know what was going on. They are knowingly looking the law in the eye and saying, we don't care about this. We're going to do what we want to do. And that is uniquely dangerous. That's uniquely aggressive in a way we haven't otherwise seen. The last point I want to make for this moment is it's extremely important, and it's always been extremely important. And I will give our friends in the establishment media more credit than I might otherwise be inclined to do. I appreciate CNN's statement standing up for Don, a former employee, which is not something you would always necessarily see. And I think the viewers at home should take that for what it is, a remarkable rallying around Don because of the seriousness of what's going on here. But for a long time in establishment journalism, there's been a skepticism of certain types of journalists, the type of journalist who might go live stream a disruptive protest. A Black journalist, are they an activist, or are they a journalist, right? Someone who's a cable news type of person, right? Oh, he's a stunt queen, he's doing this for attention, or X, Y, and Z, right? We see that type of disparagement historically. And one of the dangers of that has been that no matter what you think of Don Lemon, no matter what you think of Georgia Ford, no matter what you think of the live streaming journalist, the citizen journalist, the person who shows up with their cell phone camera, right, is that we have to stand up and protect their rights to this First Amendment behavior. I would say even more so than we do when someone in the more established media gets arrested, when someone who has the backing of corporate attorneys, who has lobbyists, right? Because these people are so much easier to silence. Again, we know this as Black journalists. We know that it's so much easier to marginalize us, to push us aside, to run us out. And Black communities know that when there are not Black journalists present, when the only people around are those who have corporate interests, right, who don't want to upset the administration or don't want to upset law enforcement, we know that journalism cannot serve its fundamental accountability role. And so this is outrageous. It is a clear, knowing violation of, again, not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And I do think while Don is going to get a lot of attention, he already is, as he should. I do think we want to keep lifting up the name of Georgia Fort here because what we know is that an arrest of a journalist is going to impact people differently. And Don is high profile enough that he has great attorneys. He's got a lot of friends across the country who are going to stand up and speak up. But we can't forget the Black woman who has also now been incarcerated. And we have to make sure that, if they let Don out tomorrow, that can't be the end of the story.
Let me also give people some perspective. This is Ethan McKaylee's book called The Defender, How the Legendary Black Newspaper Changed America. Here's what people don't realize. During World War II, Black newspapers were reporting on racism in the military. People need to understand that the United States federal government under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt literally threatened to imprison Black newspaper publishers and threatened to shut Black newspapers down because they dared to report on racism in the military. They said that Black newspapers were committing a treasonous act because of their reporting. They said that the Black newspapers, they should have been falling in line and standing with the government against fascism. It was the Pittsburgh Courier that started a campaign called the Double V campaign. People need to understand, during World War I, Black newspapers fell in line, really didn't focus on racism. World War II, they said, we ain't doing that again. They created it's called Victory at Home, Victory Abroad. But if you want to understand what Wesley was just talking about, our government was trying to shut down Black newspapers. And he details it in this book because of they were reporting about racism. So let's understand, America has a history. This is also, this was a Pulitzer Prize winning book right here by Gene Roberts and Hank Klibanoff. called The Race Beat, The Press, the Civil Rights Struggle, and the Awakening of a Nation. You had the press, black press, who were beaten, who were being attacked. Let me remind people, racists blew up the newspaper of Ida B. Wells Barnett twice. So government has, 1921, Tulsa race riot. A.B. Smitherman's newspaper was burned down as well. That was part of the government as well. So let's be real clear. Government has a history of trying to silence journalists. Listen, the Nixon administration took the New York Times and the Washington Post, mainly the Washington Post, to court over the Pentagon Papers. Journalist Seymour Hersh. So there's a long history of government despising journalists and fighting journalists. And that's what this is about. This is not about personalities. To Wesley's point, absolutely. Listen, CNN fired Don getting paid millions from CNN. Georgia Fort, our audience, y'all can roll a video. Georgia Fort, our audience is familiar with her. We've had her on Roland Martin Unfiltered, Black Stud Network numerous times, talking about various issues. But she is an independent journalist who's been scrapping and trying to make her way there in Minneapolis. But what we have to recognize is, if it's Don Lemon and Georgia Fort today, it could be any one of us tomorrow.
Exactly. This is so much bigger than Don. This is so much. I don't want people to get caught up in the celebrity of Don. We've worked with him. I was his EP at CNN for several years when he was here in Atlanta. This is bigger than Don Lemon. This is about all of us. If they come after us today, which they did, as you just mentioned, when you ran the roll and ran the receipts on our history, they did it then. They'll do it again. As you know, Roland, we go way back when you were at the Chicago Defender. And I was at the Chicago Citizen newspaper, 2 Black newspapers in Chicago. My godfather, Bill Garth, God rest his soul, who started the Citizen newspaper. We were there at those newspapers in the early 90s at the same time. And our publishers were constantly being threatened. Our publishers were constantly being threatened even before we got there. And so this is not something that's new. This is something, it's like Mrs. Coretta Scott King has always is famously quoted, where every generation has its own civil rights battle to fight, right? And so this is the battle now that we have to fight. I'm proud of the students that are walking out of schools right now in ICE protests. We should be standing with them. Parents, teachers, administrators, we should be teaching them how to do this. Who was sitting at those lunch counters during the civil rights movement? Students. Freedom bus riders. Who were they? Students. So this is the time to teach young people what is happening in our country. And it's not new. It's a fight for every generation to have. And we have to remember, this is so much bigger than Don Lemon. I'm so proud of my former employer, CNN, for making that statement. No matter what the history was, no matter what you think of Don Lemon, if one is attacked, we're all attacked. And that's the problem we have here.
Feldman, I want to ask you, now that we know that they've been arrested because of charges due to the FACE Act, what can we maybe expect to happen next procedurally?
Procedurally, what is going to happen? The good thing about federal versus state, if this would have happened on a state level, he would have been sitting in jail overnight. And we know why they did it specifically on this weekend, is because he's covering a major award show. So because it's federally, when the fact that he got arrested at midnight means that the federal court system have a schedule of arraignments, and you have to be processed. Like, you have to go through the whole process of being fingerprinted, being read your rights, and going through the interview process. And once you go through that process, and you have to be completed at least by 1 p.m. I know certain jurisdictions have 12 p.m. That way that you can get seen by a magistrate before they are done for the day on pretty much every day. So the fact that he was arrested overnight, I'm predicting, and it should, unless, the powers that be that don't believe in the law and believe in procedure, he should be out today. He should be able to go through the process because of how it runs, and you can't take away how the system runs. He should be able to go through this process. It's going to be the same way that Letitia James and Comey, and I am almost sure that these charges are going to be dismissed.
Wesley, what do you have to say?
Thelma, I'm cracking up laughing. I'm sorry.
Ugh.
I'm looking at all these right-wing nutcases go, y'all have to remember, it was a grand jury that indicted Don Lemon. It was a grand jury that indicted James Comey.
Mm.
It was a grand jury that indicted Letitia James. Oh, then I love this one. Katie Miller goes, and it was in Minnesota, a blue state. Well, Virginia just showed you their blue state. And what happened to the grand jury indictment against Tish James and James Comey? Tossed. So I just love the right wingers who are going, oh no, this wasn't just an arrest. It was a grand jury. Every person can tell you, what is the famous slogan? A DA can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if they want to.
And
So,
let me add to that, Roland.
like, stop.
So, let me add to it so that people can know how easy it is, because I handled grand jury intake. I was a grand jury intake prosecutor. I know how simple and easy it is. I can sit my overly qualified nieces who are 9 years old and understand everything that I'm saying. And that's how easy. And I read the same thing. You're reading a script. You are not putting on evidence. You are not bringing witnesses. You are literally reading the probable cause affidavit that law enforcement has provided for you, or in this case, whoever, because we don't know where it came from, because it didn't come from anybody credible within the legal profession. You are reading that, and that is it. You can't give commentary. They can't ask questions. It is that simple, and that's how outdated the grand jury process is now. And we have to get out of only reading a script and allow these people to actually hear valid and verified facts in order to come to a better decision, because we continue to have more people being indicted wrongfully, and you can't undo that.
Well, the
So
only
much
way you
good
can
info.
the only way you can undo it is after the fact, when, of course, a judge steps in, and we've seen that happen numerous times when a judge does indeed step in, and so and that's what you have here. But again, and just for people just to understand, remember, previously a federal magistrate judge rejected the criminal complaint. This is what NBC says. A source familiar. It says a source familiar with the matter described Bondi as enraged by the decision. So essentially, Thelma, they went judge hopping. They went grand jury hopping. As I said earlier, MS Now reported that career prosecutors in Minneapolis are like, ain't enough evidence here, and prosecutors in LA, ain't enough evidence here. But we have, people need to understand. People who are watching need to understand what it is that they do. Federal prosecutors are, and Thelma, you can speak to this, are way different than state prosecutors. They're different than your local DA. Federal prosecutors, how they look at evidence, they go, what is the likelihood I can secure a conviction?
Mhm.
So they don't look at, Wesley, you've covered these stories for years. They don't look at flimsy evidence. They don't look at, listen, you got some local DAs who will indict folks on circumstantial evidence. No, federal prosecutors, their deal is, no. I need a very high likelihood I'm going to secure a conviction. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why they have a conviction rate of 95% is because when they indict, for the most part, your ass guilty. And people plead guilty because they know what they got up against them. And that's what they're saying right here. They're saying this is flimsy. But the Trump Department of Justice said, we're going to find somebody to agree with us. And that's all they've done here.
Yeah. Well, here, Roland, the thing I would add to that, to push that even further, right, is that typically when you are indicted or charged with a crime, prosecutors are doing so because they intend to attempt to incarcerate you. They actually believe they can convict you and incarcerate you. I'll be honest, I don't think that's what the case is here. No one in the Trump administration believes Don Lemon needs to be incarcerated. Now, look, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't take this extremely seriously. His liberty, his freedom, the fact that he is incarcerated currently and facing these charges. I think sometimes those of us who live public lives or live in the media, we can make light of that. Being federally indicted and arrested is a traumatic experience and something that can upend someone's life. I mean, just what has already happened, whether nothing else happens, is a serious abuse of power that has a real impact on a real person in Don Lemon and in Georgia Floyd. But second, we have to put this in the contemporary context of the Trump administration's relationship with the media. We know a few different distinct things, and viewers of Black Star Network know this because Uncle Ro talks about this all the time, right? But we have a few distinct things here. The first is that the media is extremely weak right now. Our establishment media has never been weaker. We've seen decades of the business model being upended. We've seen places where newspapers that once employed 500 or 5,000 people now maybe employ 5, right? We see a lower tolerance of risk. There are fewer reporters with less time covering fewer stories than ever before. Those reporters are competing with more citizen information, more, whether it's disinformation, whether it's misinformation, whether it's viral things that are half checked, right? So our information ecosystem is full of nonsense in every direction. So we have a time where we need trusted curators and verifiers of information when we have the fewest perhaps we've ever had, right? But then beyond that, we have an administration that has built on decades of Republican campaigning against the press, working to undercut and to delegitimize the press, that has also made clear it is willing to fight these weak establishment news organizations. And so in a moment like this, we need the Don Lemons more than anyone else, because the reality is, can we trust that the Washington Post would have sent a reporter into that church to document what happened? Can we trust that CBS News would have? Can we trust that the LA Times would have, right? And that's not a personal attack on any of those places. Frankly, I've worked at all 3 of those, Post, LA Times, CBS News. But the reality is, we see our establishment media in this moment attempting to coddle up to Donald Trump in various ways because they're scared of him. They're scared of what he might do. And so this sends a very clear message. Again, I don't believe Don Lemon's going to end up in prison, and he sure as hell shouldn't. What this message says is, if I'm an editor, if I'm an owner, if I'm a publisher, it's saying the Trump administration is willing to make your life hell for doing things that cover it critically, that cover it aggressively, for asking inconvenient or hard questions, for being someone who the president just doesn't like. We have to remember the president used to feud with Don Lemon all the time when he had a CNN show and elsewhere. And so all of that to say, the role beyond just the legal egregiousness here, this is a clear attempt at intimidating Black journalists who covered a Black-led protest action that whether the state level legality of walking to that church or not, like I said earlier, when people participate in demonstrations, they very often are knowingly doing something that's violating a law in one way or the other. And that's a choice they make, right? But this is a decision to criminalize Black journalists who documented this so that the world could see it. And this is the exact type of protest that very often the establishment media doesn't cover, doesn't document. Don Lemon and Georgia Floyd are the types of journalists who would ask questions that some of their other colleagues might not. And so this is an act of intimidation. It's an act of vengeance. And I think the thing that is going to be most perilous moving forward is to what extent do news organizations, now that Donald Trump has shown his willingness to flout the law and behave this way, institutions are risk adverse. How many of them are going to now pull back because they don't want to deal with this? And that is always the danger.
Roland, the Vice President of Digital for the National Association of Black Journalists, what do you say to other journalists of color who may be discouraged now from reporting?
You can't be discouraged. You can't be slow to respond. Give me 1 second. I'm going to answer the question in a second. So we literally are releasing our statement.
From
One
the
second.
National Association of Black Journalists.
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I think the button has been pushed. So I can read it live. Give me 1 second.
Take your time.
Let's see here. All right. 1 second. Like literally, it's hot off the press. So our president, Aaron Haynes, was quite busy doing lots of interviews. So we were all putting it together. So here we go. I'm going to show y'all while I'm doing it. Pull this up. All right. All right. This is the statement from National Association of Black Journalists. NABJ outrage at arrest of Don Lemon, Georgia Fort. The First Amendment is not optional. The National Association of Black Journalists is outraged and deeply alarmed by the arrest of journalist Don Lemon and Georgia Fort by federal agents and by the government's escalating efforts and actions to criminalize and threaten press freedom under the guise of law enforcement. Let us be perfectly clear. The First Amendment is not optional and journalism is not a crime. A government that responds to scrutiny by targeting the messenger is not protecting the public. It is attempting to intimidate it. And considering recent incidents regarding federal agents, it is attempting to distract it. These arrests follow Lemon's and Fort's coverage of the anti-ICE protests in Minneapolis at City's Church and appear intended to single out such messengers who were simply on site to do their jobs. This is from NABJ President Aaron Haynes. As journalists, our first obligation is to bear witness and to inform. When those obligations are met with detention or prosecution instead of protection, we must ask, what message are we sending about who gets to report and who gets silenced? A free press, not a penalized one, is essential to democracy, especially when coverage intersects with contentious public issues. This moment is bigger than two journalists. It is about whether the First Amendment has meaning when reporting is inconvenient to those in power. The selective targeting of journalists, especially Black and LGBTQIA journalists, raises urgent concerns about unequal enforcement and retaliatory policing of the press. It also mirrors a broader pattern in which government actors appear quick to criminalize those documenting injustice, while accountability for official misconduct remains elusive. When will this stop? When will journalists be allowed to do their jobs without becoming targets? When will the constitutional rights of the press stop being tested, stretched, and ignored to make an example out of those who tell the truth? NABJ calls on federal authorities to immediately clarify the legal justification for these arrests and to halt all retaliatory posture toward journalists that undermine constitutional press protections. We further call on media organizations, newsroom leaders, press freedom advocates, civil rights groups, legal experts, and allies across the country to not only stand together, organize, and act, but to also closely monitor these cases and unapologetically speak out against any actions that threaten the ability of reporters to do their jobs safely and without interference. The normalization of arrests during lawful news gathering poses risk to all journalists. Journalism that holds power to account strengthens democracy. That mission must be defended, not punished, not now, not this way, and again, not on our watch. The folks who signed this letter, who stood with NABJ in this statement, the Association of Foreign Correspondents in the USA, National Press Photographers Association, PEN America, Defending Rights and Dissent, Radio, Television, Digital News Association, Society of Environmental Journalists, Investigative Reporters and Editors, National Writers Union, Whistleblower and Source Protection Program at Exposed Facts, Arab and Middle Eastern Journalists Association, Association of LGBTQ Journalists, Committee to Protect Journalists, Asian American Journalists Association, National Association of Science Writers, South Asian Journalists Association, National Association of Hispanic Journalists, Free Press Action, Media and Democracy Project, International Women's Media Foundation, Freedom of the Press Foundation, Institute for Nonprofit News, the Robert C. Maynard Institute for Journalism Education, Amnesty International USA, Human Rights First, Aegis Safety Alliance, Asian American Journalists Association, Arab and Middle Eastern Journalists Association, Trans Journalists Association, URL Media, Tiny News Collective, Center for Journalism and Democracy, GLAD, National Writers Union, the Intercept Freedom Defense Fund, the News Guild, CWA, Journalism and Women's Symposium, the Association of LGBTQ Journalists, National Association of Hispanic Journalists.
My.
Tanisha, what are your thoughts? What's coming up for you?
I love the solidarity in that. That's all of us. That's all of us. As I said before, if you come after one, you come after all of us. So many of us who have gone to school to become journalists. I have a big J on my chest, right? Like, I believe in being able to tell a story, be objective in telling a story, both sides, 3 sides, 4 sides to the story, being able to dig out the facts and research. This is something that I've been doing for almost 30 years now. And I'm almost in tears reading that, to see the solidarity of so many of us coming together, saying we're protecting what we went to school for, what we have vowed to do. And we are able to stand together for the bigger cause, and we will not be intimidated. We will not be bullied. These tactics will not stand with us. And I'm excited and eager to see what is next. What do we do next to say enough is enough? We have our colleagues who can't even do their job, as Wes was saying. They're so intimidated. I'm hearing from them because I'm not in the newsroom now. I'm a former student employee, so they can tell me and share these things in confidence, but they are afraid to report because they are being threatened, because they are being told what to say and what not to say. Can you imagine that from any other profession? No other profession is under this scrutiny right now. No other profession is being intimidated like this. I mean, to do what they did to Georgia Ford. I am a mom, and if you come to my door in the middle of the night, I mean, God bless her. She was calm. She was good. I don't know if I would have had that in me. My videotape may have looked a little bit different, but God bless her right now. And as Roland said, we have to protect her, a woman, a mom, a woman of color. At this point, we are all circling around, whether it's NAHJ, AAJA, NABJ, NLGJ, all the whole alphabet. At this point, we are all coming together to say, this is wrong on every level. We have First Amendment rights. Our positions, our roles, our industry is protected by the Constitution, the press. There's no other professions listed in the Constitution but ours, because it is so powerful. It makes so much sense. And for the legalities of it, we have to be protected, knowing our rights as journalists when we're covering stories. What are our rights? You know, we here in Atlanta, I'm the former president of the Atlanta Association of Black Journalists, and I was talking to the current president right now, Connis Presley, this morning about, you know, what are we doing now to ensure that we have programs in place, workshops, seminars in place to empower our journalists, to teach our journalists what our rights are when we're out on a story. And that is important to me from the legality standpoint as well. I happen to be married to an attorney who happens to also represent the estate of Dr. King. I'm not sure, Roland, if you saw that.
I have it.
You have it. Would you want me to read Bernice King's statement, or you want to read it?
Have it up right now. Bernice King posted this. She's the CEO of the MLK Center. We are in a dangerous place as a nation when members of the press are taken into custody for exercising their First Amendment rights to a free press, while federal agents kill with impunity. The arrest of journalist Don Lemon. Now she says Trey Hearn, Gene Cruz, and Jamal Lydell Lundy, they are not journalists. Georgia Ford, as dictated by the current presidential administration, should alarm us all. We must not look away or be dismissive. This is serious, and I am calling everyone to a higher state of consciousness and awareness of where we are. This is fascist behavior, and now more than ever, I urge us to persistently seek out and study nonviolence so that we have the necessary mindset, tools, strategies, and coordinated efforts, not only to resist in this moment, but to bring into being a true state of justice.
Thelma, what type of weight do you think that these statements will have?
The weight brings comfort in knowing that we are all collaborating and partnering in what we all know is a criminal prosecution that's wrongfully. So with these statements, I hope that people really marinate to know that this is safe. It is safe for you to use your constitutional right, and that there are people out here that are going to come to the front line and hold space to make sure that your rights are protected. Do not live in fear. If you live in fear, fear will own and control you. And that's what this administration wants, is for you to live in fear. Why do you think they came after African Americans on this matter? Because, like I said earlier, we are not on the other side where we were during the civil rights movement. We are on the side of reporting the uncomfortable truth, exposing the uncomfortable truth that they have been living in for decades, and they don't like it. So who are you going to come after when you can't arrest us for what you thought that you were going to be able to? You're going to try to silence Black media. See, what they thought was, when they bought up all these networks, we're going to be silent. They weren't going to be, we was going to sit on the sidelines and not do anything. And that's why Roland Martin stands years ago about creating Black media. Is bringing right now. It is showing when everybody said, no, that's not a good idea. He said, no. Right. And guess what's happening right now? Black media is being able to push the uncomfortable truth, and they don't like it. They're like, dang, how these Black people keep showing up?
Come on now.
Because you can't control us. When we know what our power is, that's how we get to live in our power, and they can no longer control that power cord, because we have our own power cord. And that's what they thought that they were doing by pulling that switch out of the input. You can't do that no more. So I hope those statements that we are in solidarity together is that we continue this movement. And I'm not even talking about just for journalism. We as Black lawyers, we have to see, okay, we have to protect y'all. So now we got to look at it. Okay, how can we collaborate, not only as for Black journalists, but for Black lawyers, and we create this ecosystem? Because we've been past the time to do it. But if it's an important time right now is to do it.
Here's what's also crazy. You have all these right-wing people who are on social media talking, especially Eric Erickson, who bills himself as this super right-wing Christian, and talking about, how this church was grossly impacted by this. But Roger Parloff, senior editor for Lawfare, who's also a journalist, if you look at his Twitter feed, and I have it up right here, he's been talking about, the impact on other churches. He says how DHS, how they have been staging in the parking lots of some churches. There's one particular pastor here said that their multicultural church, 50% white, 50% Black, Asian American, Latino, how they are scared. They've had to go online as a result because their people are scared of their status. He also had this other tweet here where he said ICE agents gathered in the parking lot of another church serving 400 mainly Liberian immigrants. ICE gathered license plate numbers and followed a church member home. Citizen and legal resident parishioners fear ICE because of racial profiling stops and detentions per same declaration. And you see it right here. So it's very interesting. These right-wing evangelicals like Eric Erickson, they don't care about these churchgoers. They don't care about these church parishioners. They only will talk about the folks who were actually at that church service where Don Lemon, Georgia Fort were recording. And again, people have to remember, they were protesting at that church because the pastor at the church works for ICE. That's why they were actually there. So I just want people to understand, when you see these right-wing evangelicals saying who's speaking up for the church members, be very clear. They aren't speaking up for the other Christians who are being targeted by ICE, only right-wing evangelicals.
Connect the dots. This pastor is connected to ICE. This is not about the church. This is about this particular church, St. Paul Church in Minneapolis, with this leader. And that is what this is about. So you can't group the church into this conversation. No, this is isolated to this incident, why these group of people were going into this church to protest against a man who was hiding behind Christianity. And that's what burns me up. Is this really what Jesus would do? We're hiding behind Christianity. Our job is to be the hands and feet of Christ if you're a Christian, right?
Mhm.
And to treat people kind and to go after those and help those who are less fortunate and poor and do not have, and those who do not look like you. Those are the teachings of Christ if you are a Christian. So when you hide behind, don't get me preaching in here, the words of Jesus Christ, and want to say Christianity, that is a huge problem. And that is what they're trying to do, create propaganda so they can believe this, and their ambassadors go out and spread this foolishness. That is what's happening. And then people are drinking that Kool-Aid. And that's what will continue to happen. We just spoke about a few seconds ago on different networks, right? Just look at Nexstar getting ready to purchase Tegna.
Yes.
That is huge. You know,
Yes.
the amount of one messaging coming to you, no other message but this message that has been
Correct.
approved by the administration, and that is all you're going to see. It's going to look like state-run TV pretty
Right.
soon, and people will be fed propaganda and foolishness, and that is what's happening. It's slowly chipping away, and he told us what he was going to do in Project 2025. I mean, it's no joke. He laid it out. I mean, I give the man credit for that. He told us what he was going to do. We decided to sit around and not vote and not believe him. So here we are. So what do we do now? And that is the problem that we're facing. We have to have our congressmen and women, our senators, everyone on one accord, our groups, the agencies that Roland Martin just read out from the NABJ statement. We all have to be on one accord saying, we will not cave. We will stand up for what is right. And we all know this is not even about, at this point, who's Republican, who's Democrat. To me, at this point, if you have any decency in your body, if you're human in any way, character, morale, if you even taught this to a child, a niece, of anyone, like the things that we're teaching to young people is not even what's playing out in the highest office of the land. And that is where I have a problem.
Folks, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer went to the floor of the United States Senate, and he actually spoke about the arrest of Don Lemon, Georgia Fort, and others.
On another issue, last night, federal agents arrested journalist Don Lemon in Los Angeles after he recently covered protest activities in Minnesota. Once again, the administration is behaving no differently from police states and authoritarian regimes across history. They've arrested a journalist for the crime of doing his job. And let's be very clear, this arrest is not just about one journalist in one incident. The arrest is a dark message to journalists everywhere. If you dare criticize this administration, watch your back. That's not a democracy. That's a police state. And that is pure authoritarian bile. Democracy will suffer if the government chokes our civil liberties. Under this administration, the Department of Justice has all too often become the Department of Vengeance. Don Lemon should be released at once and the frivolous charges against him dropped. Now on the Fed.
The way
Give me a second. I'm going to pull up I just saw the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus Political Action Committee Chair Greg Meeks. They also dropped their own statement as well regarding this. This is the statement from the CBC Pact. It reads, Donald Trump and his cowardly goons' attack on the free press will not go unanswered. Americans will rise to defend the fourth estate, and the Congressional Black Caucus will fiercely protect the black press, a vital institution that has amplified the voices of marginalized and oppressed communities since its founding. We stand with Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, and we will defend their rights as journalists. Brittany?
Well, Roland, there's been a wealth of information here today, and I do want everyone to share with us your final thoughts. I want to start with Wesley. What's coming up for you?
Sure. Thanks, Brittany. You know, the thing I'm thinking about here is I'm imagining for a second, because I'm also thinking about how this is going to play out in the public fight moving forward. There are those of us who are obviously very quickly going to speak out about the First Amendment rights of Don and of Georgia. But what we see, and the Trump administration did this purposely, right? They took advantage of this arrest in part because there's going to be sympathy, and understandable sympathy, for people who bristle at the idea of demonstrations or protests entering a church, right? No matter what the church is. In this case, there's obviously a direct connection to ICE, but there's any number of people, Black people certainly, who can imagine. My grandfather is a minister, and so the idea of political protesters storming his service might be something that might make me or a family member uncomfortable. And so I just want to address for a moment the person out there who maybe says, well, look, you got, the contrarian, the Black conservatives who watch Roland so they can get upset and text him all the things he's wrong about, right? We know that the Black people are not a monolith, and that amongst us there are folks who maybe don't like Don Lemon that much and who say, is this really that big of a deal? Here's the thing I'll say. And I say this, and I've said this a lot of times to journalistic audiences as well, talking about press freedom. The press does not have a special set of rights. We talk often about how our job is embedded in the Constitution. But what's also true is that those First Amendment rights stretch beyond people who are full-time professional journalists. One of the concerns I have here with this administration is what they're doing is they're making an argument and setting a precedent that if you are present and practicing the First Amendment while the people around you are in some way doing something unpopular, something that may be illegal or disruptive, that you no longer have those rights. And so, again, that applies not just to the professional journalist who shows up, but what happens to the citizen who pulls over their car because they see someone being beaten by the police, who now the government is willing to say, actually, this entire scene was a riot and everyone was violating the law. By being there at all, you are in violation of the law. It is chilling, but it also has real consequences. Mm-hmm. The reason we need to speak up when journalists are arrested during protests, during demonstrations, when journalists are targeted by the administration in these ways, is because we know and we understand that by having people present to document and to chronicle what is happening, it allows for a level of vision and accountability into what is happening in our world that we hope, because it's not always true, that we hope will discourage bad faith actors from harming people. The thing we have to be worried about is if Border Patrol and ICE are willing to violate people's rights, to harm them, to beat them, to kill them in the street, while they know there are a bunch of cameras around. What are they willing to do when there are no cameras around? What's happening inside the detention center? What's happening in the city that's not Minneapolis right now that we're not looking at, right? And so if the Trump administration is willing to so bend the law in a case that everyone was watching, they are willing to so bend the law in a case involving a celebrity journalist where the incident itself we watched in real time live. What are they doing in cases that we don't even know about, that we aren't even paying attention to, and that aren't to journalists, right? Not to Don Lemon, but to Don Johnson, the dude from Philly who we don't even know about, right? What's happening to him? And so again, none of that's to diminish what Georgia and Don are going through in this moment. It's outrageous. But one of the reasons we sound the alarm in this moment is because when you are willing to do this to people who have resources, to people who have platforms, and in ways that are so clearly egregious, what are you willing to do to the least of these? What are you willing to do to the people who cannot stand up for themselves in these ways? And that's one of the things we have to be chiefly and aggressively concerned about. What happens when tomorrow my brother or your cousin sees something happening and pulls out their cell phone camera? Because if Don Lemon can be arrested and federally charged for clearly carrying out his journalistic ability, what happens when other less powerful people also carry out their First Amendment protected behavior and are targeted in this way? And those are cases we might not ever hear about. And so that's something that is top of mind for me today.
Tanisha Tidwell, Don Lemon's former producer at CNN. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with him here on the set, and I want people to realize it's bigger than Don. This is so much bigger than Don. I'm thinking about the Washington Post reporter that was killed by the Saudi family. I'm thinking about James Foley, who was beheaded by ISIS. I'm thinking about Al Jazeera media correspondents who were killed by Israeli forces. There's an attack on a journalist. If there's an attack on a journalist, there's an attack on all of us. And what's next? These people lost their lives doing their job as journalists. Is that going to happen to us next? Right? So John Lemon is sitting perhaps by now still behind bars. We don't know. But what's next for this industry? And if we don't stand up for it, what will happen? My mom used to always say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And that is where we are now. You think back on the bus boycott, the Montgomery bus boycott. There was symbolism in Rosa Parks on the bus. It was bigger than her. It was way bigger than her. It was a movement. And so this is bigger than Don. This is a movement. And I pray that no matter you watch him or not, you care for him or not, you work with him or not, you're a journalist or not, you understand our First Amendment rights are under attack. Our job is listed in the Constitution. We are to be protected. And this was wrong on every level. This is a teachable moment for every journalism instructor, professor, teacher, parent. Bring everybody to the table and have a talk about what is happening in our country. This is not about, I keep saying, about Democrat, Republican. This is about a person if you have honesty, morals, empathy, integrity, humanity, all of those things. That is what we're looking for people to come together on at this moment in this time.
Thelma Anderson, an attorney, you said it's important to band with journalists. Talk to us more.
One of the things that is very clear right now, and I want people to understand, when you have a calling and you have a purpose, and as a lawyer and as a journalist, you cannot do it in a comfortable space. So right now is the time to get uncomfortable. Get uncomfortable, because comfort has no place in what we are experiencing right now, because they want us to be comfortable, and we were comfortable. And this is how we are in the current state that we are in with the attack of Black journalists. And the one thing that I've always told people, especially when I was going through my fight as a prosecutor and speaking of and being shut down by people that look like me, you do not have to compromise your integrity for a paycheck. Never compromise your integrity for a paycheck, ever. And when you see something that is not right, speak up, because you have to live with that. And when they see that you don't speak up, that means that they know that you have a fear that they can invoke at any time. And the system right now is awarding compliance, and it's not rewarding people who defy it. And that says a lot about where we stand. To individuals that are in the same profession as me, Black lawyers, now is not the time to go and file your cases and go on about your day. You have a responsibility, the responsibility that our ancestors have afforded us, to speak up and educate about the law. I'm only one person, and I'm doing my part, but we all have to contribute to what is going on. Silence is the enemy. And if you are comfortable with that enemy, let us know so we won't tap you in. And even more so, as a Black lawyer, we did not inherit these degrees. We did not inherit being able to go into a courtroom and try cases. We didn't get these platforms. We didn't get any of this without the blood that was shed for us to be in the position that we are in. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we continue the legacy that died for us. So where we are in this state of mind right now, we all have a responsibility to collaborate and partner with initiatives that are going to continue to push and pull us not only together, but push our narratives of where we know that we're supposed to be, because they want it to be negative, because we have power. Power. And they think that, oh, we can handicap. No, they can't handicap us together. And that's what we saw in our ancestors. We saw these movements. So we got to continue, because once we continue that and they see it, because they know without the Black vote, without Black money, this economy is as shitty as they are in their integrity right now. So it is important for us, as not only Black lawyers, Black journalists, Black everything, put up or shut up. And we can't afford to be silenced right now.
I know one person that will not be silent. My boss, Roland Martin. Final thoughts?
Tanisha said something earlier. Tanisha talked about election of consequences. And in fact, in the Oval Office news conference about an hour ago, this is actually what the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump actually had to say.
I can only say, I think we'll say it very plainly, elections have consequences. The people want law and order. And we have a silent majority. You know, we have a silent majority of people. They don't go and riot and everything else, but they like what we're doing. They like having a safe city. I get calls every single day. Every person I see working in the White House, people I don't know, many people work here. And they say, I'd like to thank you, sir. Why? You've made Washington so great. We walk to work. They walk to work. You people know it very well. You walk to work now. You used to take an Uber or a taxi or something, and you even felt like in danger there. Every person in this building, I mean, virtually every time I see somebody, they thank me, because a year and a half ago, they lived in hell, and now they can walk to work and they're totally safe. Nothing's going to happen. And if anything did happen,
so
the
this
person
is what
that
you say, election of consequences. And that's a fact. Let's be perfectly clear. If Vice President Kamala Harris was sitting in the Oval Office right now, today would not have happened. You would not be seeing ICE doing what they're doing all across this country. People need to understand that. And there are a lot of people, a lot of Black folks, 616,000 North Carolina, who sat the election out. Well, guess what? Donald Trump won North Carolina. There were more than 1 million Black people who did not vote in Georgia. Donald Trump won Georgia. And just for people just to understand the electoral college math, and you know, we're always making that particular point, trying to show people how these things work electorally, and we sort of walk people through this. And that is when we talk about those two states, when we talk about North Carolina and Georgia, people have to recognize that could have changed the election. And so if you look at November 2024, Kamala Harris, when you look at the overall results of that election, in terms of who won what, recognize that it could have changed. The results could have been changed. And, you know, a lot of people sit here and, you know, they sit at home and they say, well, you know what, I wasn't feeling this way. I was upset by Gaza, or I didn't like their positions on policy and all of that. Okay. All right. That's fine. That's all good. But people have to recognize that when you sit out elections, then somebody is going to win. And we talk about the map. The reality is, when you look at this particular map, 2-7 to win, Georgia and North Carolina represented 32 electoral college votes. 32 electoral college votes. That is the number. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with the fact that if you look at the numbers, Kamala Harris got 226, Donald Trump got 312. And so, again, what happens when we sit out? There are people right now in Wisconsin who are they're farmers in Wisconsin. There are people who are in Michigan. There are folks in Pennsylvania complaining about the economy. Well, guess what? Your 3 states went with Donald Trump. So if you take North Carolina and Georgia, that's 32. You take Wisconsin, that's 10, that's 42. If you take Pennsylvania, that's 19. So now you had 61. Oh, let's go and look at Nevada. Las Vegas's economy is absolutely trash. It is in the dumpster. That's 6 electoral college votes. That's 37. So bottom line is this here. A lot of people out there who are in pain right now, your life would be different if your state had voted different. We tried to tell you. We say on this show, we have the shirts on our website. Don't blame me. I voted for the black woman. And so I would hope people look angry about the rest of Don Lemon and Georgia Ford, angry about what's happening with the economy, angry about what's happening when it comes to how ICE is treating people, angry how they're targeting people. I hope you do realize there's an election in November. Every single seat in the House, 435 are up. You have a number of United States Senate seats that are up. You have races in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Maine, in Iowa, in Ohio, in Texas, in Florida, in Alaska that will determine who controls the United States Senate. And so you can sit there and be upset. You can tweet, you can post on Instagram and TikTok and complain. All you Gen Z folks, millennials who flip for Donald Trump, now all of a sudden y'all are like, I'm regretting my vote. Well, it's too late. It's going to be there for the next 3 years. You can make amends though for how you vote in November. And I always say it, voters shut the hell up, because if you sit on the sidelines and don't get involved in the action, trust me, the other side will. And today is a result of people's inaction at the ballot box. We'll have more of this story, breaking it down at 6 p.m. Eastern on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So look forward to having y'all tune in then. Brittany?
Roland, we all just want to thank you for curating the Black Star Network and providing a space for us to have these types of conversations. So thank you, Roland, for joining us on The Breakdown. I also want to thank Wesley Lowry, Thelma Anderson, Tanisha Tedwell. Your remarks today were something that we needed here on The Breakdown. So we want to thank you. And of course, Roland Martin, again, will be coming up later on today, 6 o'clock Eastern is when his show starts. And he will have more on this. And then also remember that you can have more news 24 hours a day on the Black Star Network. Check us out online for more news headlines. And folks, your support is absolutely critical to what we do. You can support Roland via Cash App using the Stripe code, and we'll put that right there. It's in the bottom left-hand corner. You can also use credit cards. You can use PayPal, R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo's RM Unfiltered, Zelle at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. If you're old school, that's all right. Please send us a check or a money order. It's all payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered. That's P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. Our goal is to raise $1 million by December 31st. And folks, we really sincerely appreciate your support. Thank you for joining us on The Breakdown, streaming live on the Black Star Network. You can find me online at The Noble Journalist, and we'll be back again on Monday.